Hey everybody, for those of you who are interested in vintage digital cameras, well, I definitely got a treat for you today. Here we have not one, not two, but three Sony Mavica digital cameras. So these cameras, they have two things in common. One moment, please. So each of these three cameras, they have two things in common. For number one, they all use the same style battery, which this one here is the, well, it's a replacement for the F330, F550, and F570. So yeah, I picked these up on Amazon as a pack of two, and they came with a little dodgy USB charger. Yeah, so I think Sony actually used this style battery pack on a wide variety of devices, starting out probably from these digital cameras up through, I don't know, maybe mid-2000s, something like that. Who knows, maybe they're still using this pack. I mean, I don't know, because these were very easy to find on Amazon, and I think it was like $25 for two. And I did a video recently opening up the original Sony battery packs. So those offered a much lower capacity than these replacements, and I'm not sure if these are actually 2700 milliamp hours or probably 2200 milliamp hours, because these generic replacement batteries, they always like to lie a little bit on the capacity. But even if they are 2200 milliamp hours, they're still a whole lot better than the batteries that came with these cameras. So the two batteries were 700 milliamp hour and 1500 milliamp hours respectively. So yeah, so I'm going to pop this battery into this camera. Since I only have two batteries and three cameras, well, gotta swap batteries on just a little bit. They just go on the bottom like this, and that's it. So the second thing these have in common is they each record to a 3.5-inch floppy disk. 1.44 megabytes. Yeah, not a whole lot of space, but hey, back in the 1990s, floppy disks were the common thing. Almost all computers back in the 90s had a 3.5-inch floppy drive, and particularly at least by the mid to late 90s, it was very common, because I'd say about 94, 95, the 5.25-inch floppy disk drive was not quite as common of a thing. Computers back then started to have CD-ROM drives instead of the 5.25-inch floppy drive. So floppy disks were readily available. They were easy to work with. And by having a floppy drive on the computer, and of course having a camera that could record to a floppy disk, it was super convenient to be able to snap a picture and record to your floppy disk. And you could just take the floppy disk out and put it in the computer and instantly retrieve your photos. Of course, these old digital cameras did not take very good quality images. I mean, cameras that used film were, of course, by far a whole lot better back then. Matter of fact, the camera companies out there like Kodak, who were in the film business, they weren't really even concerned about digital cameras at the time. Eventually, they jumped onto the digital camera bandwagon, but back then, of course, film cameras, again, were, if you want a high quality picture, your best bet was to go with a traditional film camera. But if you want a convenience and not having to wait for your film to be developed, digital cameras were a seriously big thing. So this camera right here is the oldest of the bunch. This one right here is the newest of the bunch. This one right here is a Sony Mavica FD7. So yeah, MVC-FD7 from 1997. And you can see it's quite big and bulky. There's your little closer look at it right there. I'll get a close look at all three of these cameras in the computer room before we end this video. I just want to start this video out in the kitchen because, well, we're going to be going outside and taking some photos with these in a moment. So, pretty big by today's standards. But the coolest thing about these, especially back in the time, was the fact they recorded to a floppy disk. So yeah, this one is an FD7. My grandpa, I think, picked this up at a thrift store or something like that because he didn't buy this one brand new. That's why it's in good shape. Because we're going to get to this one in a moment. So this one here, I'd say is in very good condition for its age. I mean, it's almost 26 years old now. It is probably 26 years old now. And it still works perfectly fine. The only issue is it needs a new timekeeping battery, which on this one is simply right there, and it's a CR 2025, which I don't have. I'd have to order some. So this one and this one, you can easily replace the timekeeping cell on. Alright, so this camera right here, this is a Mavica MVC-FD73. Yep, FD73. So if you look at this one, you can see how it's pretty beat up. I mean, very beat up. So this camera right here, guys, this one has been with me since it's brand new. My grandpa and my mom, one of the two, bought this camera brand new back in 1999. This is a 1999 era camera. 1999 was the year this camera was released, and it was our first digital camera. And of course, we had a computer with Windows 95 and a floppy disk drive, so we easily were able to, of course, take pictures and put them on the computer, or just keep them on the floppy disk and keep them stored away for, you know, whatever to look at in the future. In case you ever wondered why I keep a floppy disk drive in the Mid-Tower Deluxe, well, this is why. Because I still occasionally come across floppy disk, and I'm always curious what's on them, because who knows, it might be pictures from my childhood. I have a lot of pictures from my childhood that were taken with this camera. Either when my parents were on vacation, they took pictures of me or whatever, or these pictures I took with it. I mean, this thing got used. Now, the reason why it's so beat up and worn out was because my mom and my grandpa, they used to sell antiques on eBay way back in the day. This camera got used, I'm going to say, for probably 8 to 10 years. It was like 2009 or so when my grandpa finally quit using this thing. He finally got a newer camera that used an SD card. But the reason why this camera got used so much was because the images it took, of course, were condensed. They didn't take up a lot of space because they had to fit on a floppy disk. And that worked good for websites, because, I mean, a lot of websites back in the day, they had huge restrictions on how big of a photo you could post. And this one, of course, the image quality was not that great, but it was just right. The focus on this camera is amazing. It has good macro focus, and that's one of the reasons why it got used so much, was because, again, my grandpa and my mom sold on eBay, and a lot of times they were selling pottery and glassware and stuff like that. And any nicks and cracks or imperfections, which they documented in the listing, this here did a good job getting photos of those little imperfections. So this thing, like I say, it got used hard. The battery door wouldn't close. I eventually just took it off altogether because it's not actually required to keep the battery in. But yeah, just like the other two, records to a floppy disk. So because of this, I have a box that's just slammed full of floppy disks, probably hundreds of floppy disks, 1.44 megabyte 3.5 inch floppy disks. Because, I mean, my mom, she earned her living off of eBay for several years, and this thing got so heavily used. But yeah, so this is the FD73. I know I spent a lot of time going over, of course, the history of this one, because, I mean, this one is the most important to me because, well, this is the one we've had for all these years. This one here was another one that got picked up at a thrift store probably by my grandpa. This is the newest of the bunch. This is a Sony Mavica MVC FD200. So this one is really interesting because it records to a 3.5-inch floppy disk, but it also offered the functionality of being able to record to a memory stick, which was new at the time. That the memory stick, of course, is Sony's memory card format. And of course, there was a format war going on at the time between MemoryStick and Compact Flash, among others. So, little MemoryStick card here. It's actually a MemoryStick adapter, and it's got, I think, a MemoryStick Pro Duo or a MemoryStick Duo, 32 megabyte in MemoryStick, which, of course, 32 megabytes ain't hardly anything at all in today's standards, but it's a whole lot better than the 1.4 megabyte floppy disk. So, you could either record a floppy disk on this, or you could record to a memory stick on this. So, all three of these cameras do in fact work. This one, however, the floppy drive has a little bit of an issue. At first it wouldn't read the floppy drive or the floppy disk at all. Now it tries to read it, but it would always say that the disk is write protected when it's not. Floppy disk, they have, of course, a little switch on the bottom of them which enables write protection. So if you pop this down, this little switch here, that prohibits the floppy drive from writing to the floppy disk or erasing it. So a lot of times when you would get software that was on a floppy disk, the little switch would be down here. Probably in some cases the floppy disk would be permanently molded like this to where you couldn't accidentally erase your software. So that's what that's for. But for some reason this camera it'll always say that the disk is protected. So I'm going to start this one up. You can see it comes up. Well, these things act a little funky because the timekeeping battery is dead and we need to replace it. So yeah, pretty cool. So these offer a lot of the functions that you would have on modern cameras, such as optical zoom, autofocus. You have some leeway of being able to program the camera. You can adjust the exposure. This one you can manually adjust the focus if you wish. This one here offers some basic functions. Now this one here was actually the budget model. There were several other models out there that I believe offered more functionality. But this one you do get the ability to, of course, control the flash. You have program AE. You can adjust the exposure. You can apply picture effects such as negative, sepia, black and white. Yeah, so this one here, again, was the one I used the most. Now this one here, I forgot to mention, the zoom on this one is not as good. This only has 3 times optical zoom, whereas the other two have 10 times. This one, however, actually can record videos. They're not great, but it can record videos. You're limited to like 6 seconds of video per clip. And I don't think there's sound included. We'll have to experiment with that. So, yeah, let's take these outside and have some fun with them. Okay, so now we're out here on the porch, and we're going to take some photos with each of these 3 cameras. So we're going to start out with the Mavica FD7. So the way this works is power it on like so. So it started up. Not sure exactly how many photos you can put on this. I think it's roughly 20 or 30, something like that, depending on the quality that you select. So you can actually zoom in with this. Again, we got 10 times optical zoom. And for example, I'll take a picture of these trees over here. Taking pictures like it's 1997. Yeah, listen to that. Let's take another one. Let's pull back out a little bit with this one. Okay, so it's recorded to the drive, or to the floppy disk. Let's just take a random photo. Again, really cool. So, this wouldn't be complete without y'all getting to see me with this camera. Yeah, this is, I'm telling you guys, this is like going back to the 90s. Do a close-up of the power pole over there. You know me, I'm always taking pictures of power lines. And of course, because it has to record to the floppy disk, there is a little bit of a delay between when you can take your next picture, like 5 or 6 seconds, something like that. Man, it's a busy road. I'm telling you. You wouldn't think this little street back here would be so busy, but it is at times. All right, let's get a zoom in of my recording camera. Why not? So it's actually focusing on the truck in the background, which you'll get to see when we review these photos. So, I had looked up online, I did a little research on his camera. So, the FD7 is, I think, one of Sony's first digital cameras, fully digital cameras. So, I mean, this thing was a really big deal back in this day. Now, I have to look again and see what the initial price was for these. Pretty sure it was up there quite a bit. If I'm not mistaken, I think my parents, or my mom and my grandpa, paid a pretty good bit of money for that FD73 over there. So let's get a picture of the other camera sitting there. Why not? Okay, so we have used up half of our floppy disk. So we can go back to and review our photos. We have 18 photos on here already. So 18 photographs is halfway filling up a floppy disk. So of course the image quality is not going to be the greatest, but I mean, for the sheer fact that you had the convenience of instantly getting your photos, I'd say is a pretty fair compromise back in the day. It does take a moment to retrieve photos. So I will actually provide some photos in this video at the end of the video. That way you can get a good idea of exactly what they look like. Alright, so let's go and move on to the second camera, which is the FD7 III. So, I'd say the fact that this camera here being so beat up, it really shows just how reliable these things were. Alright, so we'll start this one up. And of course it's telling me that the clock battery's dead. And it thinks it's January 1999. So, this one, comparison to the FD7, the screen is roughly the same size. The floppy drive on this one is on the right side when you're looking, and of course at the back of the camera it's on the right side, and on the FD7 it's on the left side, I think. Could have that wrong. No, it's on the left side on the FD7. Yep, I was right. So, very similar. So we have, of course, the optical zoom. So apparently this camera here is a little bit better on battery life, because the other one didn't estimate nearly as many minutes. I mean, 361 minutes. I've never seen this thing estimate such a high amount of time, because these newer batteries are, of course, newer technology and therefore have a better capacity than the original ones that came with this camera. So the pack that this camera had 14 650 cells rather than 18 650 cells. So, yeah, we'll pan out this a little bit, get another photo. Try to get some similar photos to what I did with the previous camera. Okay, so we have 16 photos on this camera, and it says that half of the disk space is used up. So we'll go to review. There's a look on the display. I'm telling you guys, this really brings back memories using this camera. I tell you what, when I was a kid, I was always messing with either video cameras or camcorders or regular cameras. Either digital cameras or disposable ones. You know, the disposable cameras, you know, the film cameras wasn't so good because I would use up all the film, whereas with this it's a little different. Because I used to take pictures of anything and everything. There's some pictures that I took inside last night. taking a picture of my finger. I was demonstrating the macro focus on this one. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to the third camera. Alright, so I'm going to pull the battery out of this one and stick it in this one. The battery in this one is tight to get out. You have to have a small flat blade screwdriver to help pull it out. So the FD7, however, we can just pull it right out. And I do like these little, I do like the lens caps these things have. So just pop on like that, help protect the lens when you're transporting the camera around. Alright, so the batteries are a little tight in all of these. I think it's probably because these are generic batteries. Alright, so we'll pop the battery into this camera. This one, being newer, everything works a little different on this one. So if I didn't mention, this camera here is from 2002. So this one here is actually from the 21st century. This is probably one of the later models or latest models of the Mavica line that recorded to a floppy disk. And it immediately wants us to set the date and time, which again, I don't know. I'll have to look online to figure out if this camera has a replaceable timekeeping cell, because it doesn't have an obvious spot for one. This one may be of the type that has the internal rechargeable one that's soldered to the motherboard or to the circuit board, which I'm not a fan of that. I've actually had to replace the little timekeeping cell in the camera I'm shooting this video with, and it's actually inside of the display, the pop-out display. It's actually inside that. Alright, so we're just going to set the defaults there. Don't really care about the date and time on this because it's not going to keep it anyway. As soon as I pull the battery out, it's going to lose it. So we are currently using the MemoryStick, and if I switch over to a floppy disk, you'll see what happens with it. You see it's flashing an error saying disk protect, even though the disk is not write protected. Because here's somebody playing a trombone or something in the background. The disk is not write protected, yet it keeps saying that it's write protected. So we're going to use the MemoryStick on this one. So this one, the zoom is not as good. And so right about there is as far as it will zoom in using optical zoom. And everything else is done with digital zoom, which doesn't even get you that much further in. So I'd imagine the quality of pictures on this one's not going to be as good. This one can, of course, record the photo much faster using the MemoryStick, so you don't have to wait 6 or 7 seconds for it to record the file to the floppy disk. So this one here, of all of the three, can take the best quality of the photos because obviously being a little newer, and the fact that it has the MemoryStick to work with, it has additional space to work with. So this one, like the other two, offers a lot of the similar functionality, or same functionality. Alright, so I'm going to take some of the same photos. Now this one did have a carrying strap. I don't know what happened to it. But Use the digital zoom here. Which, when I put these photos in the video, you'll see for sure how the zoom on the other two is a whole lot better than this. Okay, so reviewing pictures on this one is very similar. We're actually going to do a movie real quick. So you switch over to movie, you have 5 seconds to record. So we'll do a sample video right here. So we're recording 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's it. So only 5 seconds, so it's, of course, yeah, don't expect a lot with this. And also I should mention that the max resolution this can do is 320 by 240. But for the early 2000s, it was nice to have, I guess, a little bit of a video function built into a digital camera. But back in these days, you would still be using like a traditional camcorder. For example, I used to have a Canon PowerShot S40 digital camera. I used to call it the brick because it was exactly shaped like a freaking brick. And it would record up to 30 seconds of clips in 640 by 480 and up to 60 seconds in half of that. So 320 by 240, which I think is what this one here is doing, 320 by 240. Not sure what I said earlier, but anyway. So yeah, that is a brief look at the movie function on this camera, if we want to call it that. And like I mentioned, I don't think this thing actually records sound. Could be wrong, but I'll know for sure here in a little bit when I review all these cameras. But so yeah, this one's the newest of the bunch. Offers a bit more functionality, however, is lacking in some areas. So I'm going to power this one off. And that's how you shut it off. Pretty cool. So we'll go inside and we will look at these in the computer room, and then we'll review the photos. Okay, here we're in the computer room, and let's have a look at these things again. So this one here is the FD7, the oldest of the bunch. I'm going to pull the battery back out of the FD200. Battery comes out pretty easy from that one. We'll pop it into the FD7. Alright, so we're going to start this one up. So it's still in playback mode, so if we switch over to camera, we'll demonstrate a couple little things with this one. So we'll see how well the focus works on this one. We can get pretty close with this one. So this one offers the functionality to where you can manually focus it. So if we switch to manual, you can manually jog the focus in and out So that's as far as it goes out. Get you a better look here on the camera. You can see how I'm moving a little wheel on the side. So I think that's as far as it goes in. That's actually pretty impressive. So again, I'm using this little wheel on the side. And if we switch it back to auto, it will focus itself. Alrighty, so that's kind of a demonstration of this one. And of course, you can do picture effects, like for example, pastel, negative. The negative one is really funny. This is one I used to use when I was a kid. I took so many photos in negative, but what's cool is I could take those photos, put them into Windows Paint, and I could reverse the negative on them and make them back into a regular photo. So you can see we have 5/8 of the disc used up. There's sepia, black and white, and we're back to color. Okay. Must have powered itself right back on. There we are. Okay, so now the FD73, the one that's been beat all to crap, it still works fine. I must say it's a pretty durable camera. I'm sure it's been dropped a few times too. It definitely has to have been dropped a few times. I mean, the battery door was completely messed up. Alright, so we'll power this one up. So the first two cameras, this one and the FD7, don't have a macro mode, but the FD7 you can manually jog to focus in, and this one, the macro just works. So for example, I'll take my fingers up close. This one, so the FD7 automatically adjusts focus like a, let's say like a movie camera. This one, however, you gotta press and hold the button in first stage to get it to adjust. You see it's trying to adjust the focus there. It's a little confused. As we're still zoomed in, that's why. Okay. So apparently this camera does not adjust the zoom. Okay, so it does adjust focus on the fly. Alright, so for example, this is the reason why this camera got used so much, because again, my grandpa and my mom used it a lot for, of course, eBay. Selling stuff on eBay. And you could get a really good shot of imperfections on things. Like for example, I'll do a photo of these cutters. There you go. And we'll take a picture of, for example, the FD7. So this one has a picture effect button. Of course, negative. I like the little animation it does there for Mavica when it's recording to the floppy disk. And of course we have sepia, black and white, solarize. So a little bit different in the FD7 what it offers. and you can adjust the exposure by going up into here. So if you want to turn down the focus, you can go down to as low as -1.5 and as high as +1.5. So there's a little look at the menu on this one. You have some basic functions like setting the date and time. I'm pretty sure you have the option to format the disc in here. So you have different options in here for recording. I think it can do, it's a normal, I think it's JPEG, email, not sure what that is. Bitmap, it probably, of course, I think saves the file as a BMP image. Yeah, guys, really interesting. Again, this is the camera that was with me in my childhood. It's really, it is quite amazing how well this whole thing works. Alright, so we got 5/8 of the disc used up on this one. 21 photos. Alright. So now we'll look at the FD200 up close, and again we're going to pull the battery out of this one because I have just 2 batteries. The original batteries in these things, they were all flat. So again, I had to order some new batteries on Amazon. And I think I mentioned, Sony uses this battery design, or they've used it in a lot of their different cameras up through the years. So it's a very common one. And apparently they used it in some of their camera accessories, like for their professional cameras, like their DSLRs, as well as some of the accessories that came with the DSLR cameras, like let's say an extra flash or whatever. So we'll pop this battery back into this camera. Power this one up. And again, we'll set the date and time because, well, the timekeeping cell is completely gone in this one. We're still in movie mode there. We'll do another movie real quick. Five seconds is all you can do. And of course, there's playback. Yeah, I don't know if I really looked at the playback on this one outside. So you can see that's what the actual video looks like. It's a low frame rate too. So anyway, go back to still. So we'll see what this can do for focusing. This one actually has a macro button, I think. Little focus button right there. Now you get macro mode. I'm going to say the macro on this one doesn't work as well. So there are some sacrifices with this newer model. The zoom is not as far and the macro doesn't work as well. And we'll get a picture of these two cameras. Yeah, we are not zoomed in at all, so. And you can see I can take pictures much faster with this one because, well, it can record to the memory stick much faster than it can to the floppy disk. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and retrieve the images off of these. So on the FD7, there's a open switch here that opens this door, and you press this little button here and that releases the floppy disk, and you can close it back like that. The FD73, there's a switch on the bottom right here. You push this in and pull this to the left, and that ejects the floppy disk. And of course on this one you have the memory stick, but I'll demonstrate the floppy disk on this one too. You pull this to the left and down, and then the floppy disk comes out. On this one we have the memory stick. And that pops out like that. Now this one even offers the functionality of being able to hook up to the computer through a USB cable. The other two do not. In fact, I think this one can charge its battery through USB, not 100% certain. The fact that it does have a charge indicator tells me that likely it can. Anyways, let's go and review the photos. Okay, so here we had the floppy disk from the Mavica FD7. We're just going to pop it into the floppy drive here. And then we just go into File Explorer. And we can look at what's on the disk. Okay, so we're going to look at a few of these here on the video, but I'll be putting these into the actual video at the end. That way you can actually see for real how they look. So you can open these with a photo viewer application. And this is literally how big the actual image is, which is 640 by 480. Now you have to think about it. A lot of computers back in the day, back in the 90s, late 90s, the resolution was generally 640 by 480 or 800 by 600. So this would actually take up a full screen on an old computer. So you have to think about it. This was actually not half bad. And the fact that you could put upwards of 20 to 30 photos or more on a single 3.5-inch floppy disk, that was quite a big deal. So there's a zoomed in image, and that's actually not half bad. I mean, think about it, guys. Think about 1997. You could take pictures and instantly review them, not have to wait to have them developed, and you get, at the time, a relatively decent image quality. Now, for example, I'm going to actually print out one of these photos on a inkjet printer, so that way we can review, for example, how it will look. So we'll print this one out. Okay, so I'll go ahead and print this one out here, and we'll use the OfficeJet Pro since it's a color printer. We'll do a full page photo. Why not? We'll do one. And while that's printing, of course there is a close-up of my fingers demonstrating the macro focus. So yeah, pretty cool. That was a photo from last night of my battery charger. Alright, so go ahead and switch over to the FD73. So we're going to pop out this disc here, and we'll pop this one in. And like before, we'll go to File Explorer, and we'll access the floppy disk. Okay, so here are the files off the Mavica FD73. For example, this one here. It is a 640 by 480 photo. Okay, so we're going to review some of the photos I took with this camera. I took a few random photos last night with it too. So that is actually the size that you get, and this one had I think I used the flash on this, 100% certain. May have or may not have. This one definitely did use the flash, and of course it needs to be turned like the previous one. This was a look outside, so of course very grainy. There's a look at my wood stove burning. This was without flash. This was with flash. Random photo last night. Here are my fingers. So to be honest, I did do a video last night, but I decided to scrap it and start over. There's a stack of Optiplex 390s there. These were some photos from today. Another demonstration of the optical zoom. And you see this one actually focused in on my video camera rather than the truck in the background. Here's a look in the yard. My fingers again. And there's a handle on those cutters demonstrating how well this thing can focus in on stuff like that. And of course a photo of the Mavica FD7. So again, oh yeah, and there's a negative. So again, this was very convenient back in the 90s. And of course you sacrificed some quality, but hey, it was still not that bad. For a small image, for example, let's look at the size of one of these images. Like this one here. Let's look at the size of it. Size on disk, 53.5 kilobytes. So yeah, you could definitely fit a lot of these on a floppy disk. It made good use of the floppy disk's limited space, that's for dang sure. So here's a photo of the power pole and transformer again, and I'm going to drag over a photo that I took last year with my phone using the zoom. So of course, big difference between, of course, a 1990s digital camera and a 2018 smartphone. It's a Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. Still though, this was, I mean, the fact that you could get this decent amount of a photo and get quite a few of these onto a floppy disk, that was that's quite an accomplishment, I think. Okay, to retrieve the photos from the FD200, we're going to take this little MemoryStick adapter out, or take the MemoryStick out of the adapter. So this is a MemoryStick Duo, which is why we had to use the adapter, because MemoryStick Duo is a little bit different than an actual memory stick. And this is funny, this memory stick was originally for a PSP. How funny. Again, Sony product, so there you have it. Sony using their, of course, their own style of card on their product, and we'll stick this into the memory stick slot on our card reader, which hardly ever gets used. And then we can go to File Explorer, and there is our memory stick, which is about half full. And you can see the file numbering on this newer camera is similar to newer Sony digital cameras, starting everything with DSC. So here are some photos I took with the FD200. You can see these are definitely bigger. This resolution is 1024 by 768, which is definitely bigger than 640 by 480. There's a photo in the computer room last night. There's the Q Plexi. There's my camera I used to shoot videos with. There's the webcam mounted up on the workbench. My hand again, of course, me demonstrating the macro. And these are some photos from today. This is as far as the camera can zoom in with its own optical zoom. There's a photo of the porch. And of course, with the higher resolution, things do look a bit more clear. So this camera is a 2 megapixel, I do believe. Now, of course, here's where we use a digital zoom, which took away from the detail. But still, when you compare it back with the older Mavicas, there definitely is a difference. This camera chose to focus on the truck rather than the video camera. And these are the photos I took just a moment ago. Of course, we can't forget about the videos that we took with the Mavica FD200. So they don't have sound, and they have very small frame rates, and they of course are 5 seconds long. So let's get a look at the details on these. They come in at 25 frames per second, but obviously they are not 25 FPS. Probably that's probably not even 15 FPS. That might be 10 or 5 FPS. I mean, you can tell it's very low frame rate. And of course, there is the video I took out on the porch. Another video I took on the porch. Another porch video. The video I took last night. Video in the computer room. Video on the workbench. So yeah, that's an overview of the video function. Okay, so we will wrap this up with a look at a full page photo taken with the Mavica FD7. And man, this printer, it ain't kidding when it means full page photo. It used the entire sheet of paper. So this, by the way, guys, this photo was printed out with the generic ink that I bought for this printer, and I'll put a card up in the corner where I talk about that. Yeah, so the OfficeJet Pro 2760W is one heck of a nice photo printer. And you can see, of course, the fact that, well, it's not a perfectly good image. You can see, of course, you can see the pixels there, which even show up on a printout. But hey, the fact that you could snap a picture, save it to a floppy disk back in the day, insert the floppy disk into your PC, and immediately retrieve and print out that photo and frame it, that was a big deal. It really was. And that's why these Sony Mavica cameras were so popular back in the day. I mean, it was a huge deal. So anyways, there's a look at the 3 cameras, and I'm going to end this video with some sample photos from earlier. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Well everybody, that wraps it up for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to Cuckoo channel, and be sure to tick the bell, that way you get notified of new video posts. Also, I recommend following Cuckoo Company on Facebook. A link is in the video description. In addition to computer tech videos, I have a second channel, CubeComp MTDX. Links are available at the end of this video. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching and your support.